started playing Magic in 1994 when I was 9 years old. At that age, the game was about finding the cards that you loved and trying to make those cards the ones you build around. Now I'm much older and I know a lot more about the game, but now I can build decks using my heart and my brain. This is Magic the Gimmicking, where I take silly themes, concepts, or restrictions and turn them into powerful EDH decks. Hey everybody, welcome back to Zulu's Board Game Cafe. It's me, MC Squared, and today I'm here with the next installment of Magic the Gimmicking series, where we take strange ideas and concepts, make them into powerful commander decks, and just try to have fun with this goofy take on a casual format. This month, I'm going to be talking about a double gimmick deck that I like quite a bit. We're actually going to take two slightly more common gimmicks and kind of combine them into one super gimmick. The first thing that we're going to be making is a mill-based commander deck. Now, mill for a format like Commander is a little difficult to pull off, seeing as how it's a 100 card format, and there's lots of cards that are staples that just very easily shuffle cards back into the library, so it takes a little bit to make any mill deck successful in this format. And we're going to combine it with another common gimmick, which is a colorless commander deck. These are not totally uncommon. You've probably seen one being piloted by Karn or one of the old Eldrazi Titans. So we're going to take these two concepts and merge them into a colorless mill commander deck to really go over the edge with this sort of design. There's a lot of great cards that are colorless that lean into mill, and we're going to have this deck be piloted by, yes, one of the Eldrazi Titans, Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger. Ulamog is, of course, a do-it-all colorless commander. He serves as removal, he's a giant indestructible creature, and for this deck, however, we care more about his tertiary power, and that's how he exiles 20 cards off the top of a library anytime he attacks. This is really important because it does a significant amount of cards, and it exiles them, which is going to eat other Eldrazi Titans and other effects that simply reshuffle anytime they hit the graveyard back into the deck, and it prevents a simple Felden's Cane or Elixir of Immortality from really ruining our strategy. Now, Ulamog is not the only thing that makes this deck work. We're going to go over lots of key cards that make it function properly. There are secret strategies, there's cards that you need to survive while you get those strategies in place, and really kind of how to push the game in your favor. The Eldrazi Commander is dangerous from the social contract side of EDH because it does broadcast a message of I'm playing something ludicrously powerful, but in order to make this gimmick actually have a chance at succeeding, we're going to need to lean into some of those more powerful cards that might get you hated out of a table, but for a deck like this to win, you ultimately really need them. And we'll start with the worst of these cards and just kind of work our way downhill. And when I say worst, I mean the most egregious, the things that your players are going to be upset about when you play them. And the first of those is your 2-card instant win combo, and that's the combination of the cards Grindstone and Painter Servant. Painter Servant was banned in Commander for a long time, with good reason because of how it combos so well with things like Grindstone. This is a mill win condition for almost any mill deck, and it is your primary win condition for this mill deck because it's the only one that exists in colorless that essentially lets you infinite shot somebody. You can activate it on upkeep to instant kill. You can combine it with an unwinding clock to essentially end the game immediately. And you can combo it with things like Temple Bell to prevent anyone from having any sort of instant speed, alternate effects to deal with it, all sorts of little things. But ultimately, that's probably going to be the biggest thing that you lean into to win with this deck is the Grindstone Painter Servant combination. We'll have some cards that protect those things and keep them available. We'll also have some ways to search them out quickly and really bring that murder shot online. But of course, that's not the only thing that we care about in this deck. There's still lots of other mill cards available to us that are in colorless, and if we aren't seeing our one-shot come up and the game looks like it's going to actually take a little bit more interaction, we've still got plenty of great colorless mill cards to work with. The next one is one of my favorites. It's a great early game card that just will do lots of work for basically zero effort, and that's Altar of the Brood. Alter the Brood only costs 1 colorless, and anytime you have a permanent enter the battlefield after that, it's going to mill all of your opponents. It doesn't target, so it gets around any sort of hexproof style effects, and it just keeps working. And as the game progresses, you'll play hopefully 1 to 3 permanents a minimum each turn as you do lots of card draw and land playing. So you'll really start to just shoot those cards into the board quickly, powerfully, and force all those cards off the top of your opponent's decks. It does start to broadcast your plan a little early if you get it in the early game, but it's such a powerhouse that's totally worthwhile. There's also a lot of really powerful combo cards that go with this that you can add anything that creates lots of tokens, and there's lots of those in colorless. Things like Mirrored Battlesphere, a Thopter Foundry, any of the large artifacts that generate lots of artifact tokens go great with Altar of the Brood, especially if they're repeatable ones, which you can do very easily with things like Conjurer's Closet. So Conjurer's Closet on your Mirrored Battlesphere, great way to really capitalize on this card. My next favorite low cost, high value mill artifact is one that punishes everyone on the board, and it's going to hit you too, but you're just going to have to live with that, and that's Mesmeric Orb. Every time a player untaps a permanent, they're going to mill one, and in Commander, you're playing a lot of land and tapping a lot of land. People are attacking a lot, they're activating all sorts of powers, so in general, folks are going to have a lot of tapped permanents all the time. So Mesmeric Orb is going to do a lot of work, and if it isn't doing a lot of work, it's still doing a lot of work because it means that players are taking more calculated choices when it comes to what they're playing. It means people aren't going to be so willy-nilly dumping all of their hands and things because they don't want to accidentally mill themselves out by swinging really hard with lots of creatures or tapping all of their mana to cast everything as fast as possible. Does a really, really great job of slowing things down, or if it doesn't slow them down, it speeds up your win condition, and that's what we want. And the next card, actually 2 cards, are going to be ones that this deck doesn't capitalize on very well on their own, but I do still encourage running them because they will help the deck mill out cards by virtue of your opponents doing the work for you. The first one of those is Mind Crank. Mind Crank is a very safe one of these cards, and it says that anytime one of your opponents loses life, they also mill that many cards. This deck doesn't actually have a whole lot of damage output. Of course, your commander is a 10/10, which does have the potential to swing really hard. You do have a few creatures that have worthwhile attack and damage potential, but for the most part, you're not going to be doing a whole lot of damage yourself. But opponents very likely will. A lot of the time, win conditions are based on damage, so anytime your opponents damage each other while there's a Mind Crank out, great. You're getting mill value off of that as well. Of course, it does have the potential to backfire and have everyone focus target you, but that's just something you're going to have to gauge out to make sure that you've got a good defensive strategy in place or that you're providing some sort of support by way of your group hug cards that we run, which aren't hugs at all because Howling Mine is a win condition in a deck like this, but not everyone notices that. Now, the follow-up to Mind Crank, the card that goes with it that does something very similar, is Crumbling Sanctuary. And Crumbling Sanctuary is even more dangerous for you because it affects yourself as well, and it exiles off the top. So it does mean that if your opponents get really salty about it, they can just come after you and exile the top of your deck. So be careful if you want to run Crumbling Sanctuary and just make sure you're ready for that sort of possibility and be careful. The next 2 pieces of mill artifact that we're going to come out are the 2 pieces of equipment that I really like to run. The first one is one of the most iconic pieces of mill equipment, and that's of course Sword of Body and Mind. This gives a creature protection from 2 very worthwhile colors, blue and green, protection from creatures and protection from instants and sorceries that screw with you quite frequently is great. If the creature makes contact, it does an additional 10 cards off the top, gives you tokens, great and should help you get in under decks that do run a lot of creatures in the green decks. The next is Trepanation Blade. Artifact from Innistrad will mill all the way down into the next land of a player's deck and buff the creature in question. So, especially if you do have the Mind Crank out and you've got a way to get in on someone where they're not going to hit you, hopefully with something like a Rogue's Passage that we're going to run, you'll be able to get in with that Trepanation Blade, really do a lot of damage, combo with Mind Crank, and even if you put it on a 0 power creature and mill 5 cards, with the Trep Blade, then you're going to mill an additional 5 with the Mind Crank and the Crumbling Sanctuary. Really start to peel that deck off the top. Now we've also got an entire series of the traditional artifact mill cards. Things like Grind Clock, Sands of Time, Codex Shredder, the traditional classic Millstone. My favorite among these is actually the Keening Stone. It has, shot for shot, the best mill you're going to get for the mana that you're going to put into it, assuming you've actually been putting cards into graveyards and not exiling them. It does kind of non-bow with Ulamog because it counts the number of cards in their graveyard and mills them for that many. So it's a little risky, but if you're playing most of the cards in this deck, most of them will still be putting a lot of cards into the graveyard. So you'll be totally fine to run Keening Stone and definitely get a lot of value out of it, especially if someone is putting cards in their own graveyard. If someone's playing Dredge or something, you can help their deck along by way of getting a whole lot of it in the yard, which is admittedly dangerous, but if you've got the tools to get their graveyard totally full of their library, then they don't really have any choice but to die. There's also some 4th string mill cards that you can run if you really, really just want to have them in for the gimmick. Stuff like Whetstone or Worry Beads do a very small amount of cards regularly. It's probably not worth running them in favor of running more safety cards, more removal, things like that. But if you really want to get every card possible, they're out there. I would even say Classic Millstone ranks among the ones that you probably don't want to run, just because it only does 2 cards, and we're better than that. We're better than that on Magic's Gimmicking. We're here to go all or nothing on the best possible things, but it's the classic, so that's up to you. In order to fuel all of these artifacts, we are also going to be running lots and lots of mana rocks. We have a commander that costs 10 mana. We have lots of effects that require lots of mana to make work really quickly, so you want the most efficient colorless mana rocks you can get. Of course, you're going to run the Soul Ring, you're going to run the Thran Dynamo, you're going to run the Mindstone Trio with Dreamstone Hedron, and Hedron Archive. So all of those will help you get cards into your hand, help you accelerate when you need it, all that good stuff. Now that we've got the mill staples kind of solidly in the deck, we're going to need to protect ourselves and do a whole lot to make sure that we're going to have the opportunity to survive to pull off these mill combos. So, because they don't do a whole lot to keep you from dying to your opponent's things, and once people realize what you're doing, especially if you've got some of the good cards out, they'll come for you pretty hard and fast. So let's talk about how the deck stays alive. Now, colorless removal is not particularly efficient, which is part of why we also want to run all of those mana rocks, and it can be very expensive, but the good news is that most colorless removal is very, very effective once it hits the table, and often is combined with full sweeping effects. We'll go over some of the best pieces that I like right here. The first one is All Is Dust. It's a board wipe, kills most things that most folks will play that will be particularly threatening, except all of your stuff, which all of it is colorless, except for maybe a couple of tokens that the deck can make. Your wolf tokens from your Sword of Body and Mind. No biggie. So All Is Dust, great way to clear everything from the board. Next up is Ugin the Spirit Dragon. He's basically another All Is Dust, and if you get lucky, he can stick around and shoot some stuff for 3, which if you've got your Mind Crank out, awesome, will do some milling, or if you get really lucky and you ultimate him, Draw cards, gain life, get a bunch of free permanents out. So, no wrong answers there. For single target, you have Scour from Existence, or you could run Spine of Ishtar if you want. Similar cost, similar effect. A Spine has the ability to die and come back if you want to run effects that can sack it, bring it back to your hand, that sort of thing. And then you've got, of course, all of the standard board wipe rocks out there. Oblivion Stone, Neverwinter's Disc, Perilous Vault, so on and so forth. All of those choices are available to you depending on how many you want to run and what level of safety you want to manage with destroying your own things versus destroying everything versus exiling them. Just pick which ones you like and run with them. Alright, so that covers a lot of stuff, and the next part is one of the most important, and unfortunately one of the ones that's going to have us reaching outside our mill gimmick probably the most. And that's because other than our illustrious commander Ulamog, the biggest issue with this deck is finding creatures that are on theme. Fielding worthwhile ones that help the deck survive and also contribute to mill is pretty tough. But there's a very, very limited selection of creatures that actually fit the theme and contribute to the mill, and most of them are pretty bad. I've got a few of them in my deck list, and I've got a few of the ones that don't fit the theme in here as well. Ultimately, since there are so many good mill cards, I think that in order for this deck to win, you need to run some of these creatures that are really just going to help you survive, rather than try to have them also contribute to the mill strategy. I'm not a huge fan of it, because I do like these gimmicky decks to be 100% leaned into their gimmick, but for this one, I'm totally okay stepping outside a little bit just to have somebody not know what hit them when they lose to the Colorless Mill deck, because these creatures won't win you the game for the most part. Most of them are just going to be here to keep you alive. The first one, actually, I'm going to talk about does lean into the mill strategy, though, and that is the Oblivion Sower. It's a great creature. It mills an opponent. It ramps you, especially if you've hit somebody with Ulamog once already. The Oblivion Sower is very likely to get you 3 or 4 land just in one nice shot, bare minimum, for if you're using it properly. So, cannot espouse the virtues of this card enough. Probably the best overall theme fit card to go in here. The next one that I really like is Blight Herder, since you're going to have a lot of cards of your opponents in exile. It's really easy to get that trigger, and then it's going to give you the Eldrazi Scions, which are cheap chump blockers, and also a possibility to ramp. Also, if you've got the Altar of the Brood, it's going to be a lot of Altar of the Brood triggers for you. Blight Herder, great. Next is going to be the Platinum Pals, Platinum Angel and Platinum Empyrean. You can run one of them, you can run both of them. They basically do this same job, and that is keep you alive. Force people to kill them before they worry about killing you. They're bombs. They are big-ish creatures in the meantime, but they're not there to attack. They're there to survive. They'll probably eat disenchant effects, but it's really making people spend the time and mana to get rid of them and then not have them spend that time and energy killing you. The next one is here to help you win, and it's kind of on theme because it's a very colorless fill card, and that's Kuldrotha Forge Master. You will usually have a lot of spare artifacts out in this deck, and this one can sacrifice 3 of them to go get any one. And since we know that our biggest win con is just a combination of Painter Servant and Grindstone, anything that lets you tutor artifacts directly onto the battlefield, essentially, if you get one of the 2 pieces of the win con and the Kuldrotha Forge Master, great. You've got what you need to win. And the last creature that I highly recommend is Silent Arbiter, because your deck does not very much care about attacking, and the only creature that you really want to attack is going to be your Ulamog. If Ulamog is the only creature attacking, great, and then only one creature can block, and when it comes to attacking you, only one creature at a time will be able to attack you, which will give you time to set up your defenses and help block. So those are the creatures that I think will really help this deck see victories when you play it, because they'll keep you alive and speed up you getting to your win con. Other cards that aren't creatures that are going to be imperative to your survival, or at least very helpful, are going to be a few very good things. I've got a short list here, my top 5 cards for keeping you alive. First one, I think, is the most reasonably playable one, and that's going to be Ensnaring Bridge. Helps keep you safe from large things attacking you at all. Certainly if you can keep your hand empty, which you should be able to do, because there's only a few really high cost cards in the deck, and certainly most of them you won't have a reason not to just play out into the world. You don't have any big instants or sorceries that you'll want to hold for most cases. Your only really big ones are removal, and luckily your board wipe sorcery doesn't affect you, so great. The next one is going to be a Weak Stone, if you can get one. Gives all attacking creatures -1/-0. Just makes it a more survivable board state all around. The next is going to be Orbs of Warding. Gives you hexproof to prevent people from targeting you egregiously, and also shuts off pingers like Nekuzar, things like that, and anything that attacks you just does a little bit less damage. Urza's Armor, exact same gimmick, doesn't give you the hexproof, but prevents damage from all sources by 1. Really helps when folks have pestilence type effects, or any red deck type effects that just ping you for small amounts over and over. Great for that. And the last one is going to be one that you probably won't field in the deck unless you have a table really cool about running proxies, and that's Force Field, because, well, Force Field is great for survivability in your artifact deck. Force Field also costs thousands of dollars. So if you've got one, great, throw it in there. It's perfect for this. If you don't worry. There's plenty of other options that I think will be both obtainable from a cost perspective and great at keeping you alive. That pretty much covers all of the non-land permanents and cards that you're going to run in the deck. Should have a whole lot of choices with some variety to mix and match if you want to customize the deck to your liking. The last bit that I'm going to go over is the lands. There are quite a few colorless lands out there. Of course, there's the basic land waste that is available depending on how much you want to lean into having specialty lands. I'll go over probably my 5 top lands to put in the deck other than basics to make sure that you've got good stuff in there that will help you actually win the game and speed stuff along. The first is Inventor's Fair. Inventor's Fair is just a way to search up an artifact, which of course, since you have a 2-card win combo that is artifact based, really want to be able to have that to just grab it, slam it, and go. The next are going to be some of your ramp options, and the 2 big ones that I like here are Eye of Ugin and Eldrazi Temple. They both do a really good job of letting you get Ugin onto the table faster and also help with a few other cards in the deck. You have at least 1, maybe 2 or 3 other Eldrazi that you'll be running to supplement the deck, so these do a good job of making you cast those even faster. And number 4 is the Gaia Reach Sanitarium. I really like this for instant speed activation, draw, discard. It helps you get cards in your hand. It makes opponents go through their deck faster without giving them genuine card advantage because it also forces the discard. So Gaia Reach Sanitarium, one of my favorites. And the last one of the lands that I like is the Hall of the Bandit Lord. It's a colorless land, comes in tapped. Yes, it costs 3 life, but for when you really need to just have Ulamog hit the table and start making drastic changes to the board state, Hall of the Bandit Lord really does a great job of having you surprise somebody with 20 Exile Mill to the face, especially if you make it towards a late game and someone only has a few cards left in their library because you've been plucking at it. High speed Ulamog, great choice. And of course, you'll be able to see all of the different lands that I run. I'll have the deck list posted at the end of the video here for folks to take a look at. And that's really the whole gist of the deck. All these pieces will come together and give you a very powerful colorless EDH deck with a very surprising win condition for your table. If you build one of these decks, feel free to tell me how your experiences with it went. I'd love to hear how these decks perform outside of the regular games that I play them in. And feel free to drop your favorite gimmick in the comments. Let me know what you'd like to see me work on as far as a deck with design ideas. Remember to subscribe to Zulus to see all of our regular videos. You can check out the rest of the series and all the types of things that we do for all of our other games. Learn to place for board games, do some Pokemon streaming, all that great stuff. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Thanks for choosing Zulu's Board Game Cafe. Have a good one. Bye.